Hi, good morning to all of you. Today I'm going to discuss a new questions with you people from the environmental geography section in this question answer session of geography optional. So here I had taken a question from the environmental geography, and this topic is very essential, very crucial. This is the topic ecological succession, which is a part of community ecology. So let's see the question first. What is the question here for you people today? Describe key stage of ecological succession. And another part of the question is what are typical changes that occur in species composition, biodiversity, and physical environment during succession? So here when you look at this question, there are two parts of this question. One, here you have to just describe the key stages, and in the second part, which is more dynamic in nature, what you have to explain here, what are the typical changes which occur in species composition if it happens, or in the biodiversity or physical environment during the succession. So as I had given you time of 1.5 minutes to create a structure, so let's make the structure first. How you can write the answer, and if you understand the stages, you can start from that. So let's make a structure first. For the hint to all of you, I had also given the structure here. So let's see without wasting the time. Okay, so when you are taking this question, how you can create a structure? As you know, there are three part of your answer. One is introduction, next is the body, and then inference or conclusion. How you can start, okay, to write the answer of this question? Here you can start with the definition of succession. So what is succession? We had discussed earlier, succession is replacement of one community by other. So this replacement of one community by other at a specific or particular area over a period of time is called ecological succession. So what it reflects? It reflects that the succession is a dynamic process. So why this replacement takes place in a particular area? What are the causes behind that? So if you understand well the causes, you can understand that second part is depend on that concepts. Okay, so here in the second part you have to find out what kind of typical changes occur during the process of succession. So what I have mentioned, that in introduction you have to write the definition, and then you have to quote an address and link this second part also with what kind of changes led by the succession. Then in the body part, you have to address this, the first part. Here, what the examiner wanted, you have to describe the key stages. Primarily, I had discussed different type of successions with you people, those who have attended the foundation classes. Okay, primarily when we classified succession are of two types, primary and secondary. Primary succession begins with the bare area where there was no biotic community earlier, but the secondary successions which occur because of the disturbances caused by volcanic eruption or fire. Okay, it means when the succession begins in such area over a period of times where already a biotic community earlier exists, but due to certain disturbances, okay, that space lost the biotic community, and again the succession begins, called secondary succession. But here, whatever the successions, okay, whether it is primary or secondary, at every place is what you find, there are these stages, through these stages, successions occur. What are these stages? Nudation, invasion, establishment, competition and reaction, as well as climax stage. So if you are explaining it these stages briefly, okay, then you must address this part of the question. Now after that, you have to, okay, present your ideas through the diagram. So you have to make the diagram of ecological succession. Further, because the second part, the examiner wanted to know what are the typical changes, okay, takes place during the process of successions in the species composition or biodiversity, or what kind of environmental changes do occur. So you can explain this part of the question through the flowchart also. I am preferring here the flowchart. Okay. So I will show you in the model answer how you can make a flowchart or a table. Okay. So in the tabular form, you can present your ideas. And finally, we come on inference, where we can add both the part and design a good inference. So this is the structure for this question. Let's understand with this model answer. As I have said, in the first part, we have to define this ecological succession. So here what in the I had also created a context, and with context I had mentioned the definition. So let's understand what I had mentioned, that ecological succession is natural gradual process by which the ecosystem change and develop over time. As I had discussed during the foundation batch, that EP Odom has used the term ecosystem development at the place of ecological succession. Okay, while the Hult and Clement use the term ecological succession. So let's understand what is ecological succession. Is a dynamic, natural, gradual process by which ecosystem change and develop over time. It is it involves the replacement of one biological community by another. So in ecological succession, what you observe in a particular place over a period of time, one biotic community replaced by another. Now, let's see. Okay. Now, as I have said, primary succession start with the bare area, while the secondary succession start with the disturbances. So what led to this replacement? Either disturbances or formation of the new habitat. Okay. Now, so this is the introduction for the first part. Here you have addressed with the definition, but you have to include the second part of the question also. That's why I had mentioned this statement. What I had mentioned, that succession leads to the changes in species composition, biodiversity and physical environment. I had just added that statement which is written in the question, and ultimately resulting in a more stable and mature ecosystem. So why such changes we observe? Because that led to, okay, that led to what? The development of more stable ecosystem. So I had addressed in this introduction part both the part of the question. Now come to the first part, where you have to describe the key stages. So here I had discussed that key stages of ecological succession. Primarily succession are of two types. You may mention this point, or even you can skip this. Okay. But if you are mentioning, if you have a time, you can make a flowchart that primarily the succession classified into two main type, primary and secondary. The primary succession begins with the bare rock, where there was no evidences of earlier any biotic community at that place. That is called what? The primary succession. What is secondary succession? When the succession begins in such an area, or began in such an area where already there was an evidence of existence of species, that is biotic community, but that biotic community has been wiped out because of us sudden changes in the environment, or we called it disturbances. Say for example, either due to fire or the agricultural activity, anthropogenic activity, or the volcanic eruption, etc. Now, so here what I have mentioned, as I have said, you can skip this point or you can mention for more clarity if you have a time. Then I had mentioned regardless of the type, whether it is primary or secondary, what you observe that all these following stages, through all these following stages or steps, the succession took place. What is the first stage? Nudation. Nude means what? Bare, naked. So in this process, in this stages of succession, what you observe that succession begins from the bare area, nude area. There was no evidences of any biotic community at that place. Okay, the rock is bare. So what I had defined here, nudation, creation of barren or disturbed area where succession can begins. How this bare area develop? Because of various activities, or maybe the volcanic eruption, as I have said, okay, or the flood or the fire or drought, okay. So that led to the what? The development of the nude area or the barren rocks. Okay, so here I had mentioned volcanic eruption, glacier retreat, deforestation, landslides, fire, etc. are the cause for nudation. Then what I had mentioned, at the nude area, at the bare rocks, what are the physical condition you observe? You can mention the condition was quite extreme. Okay, no or very little soil and harsh climate because the rock is bare and hardly a weathering processes begins. So rocks are hard. The soil are very thin if present. Okay, largely there was no soil. So climate is quite extreme or harsh for the development of biotic community. What is the second stage? At this nude area or the barren area, what happened? The spores, okay, or the seeds came from some other places. That process is called invasion. How these spores or seeds came to this area, which was earlier nude or the barren? Through the air or water or by some certain animals or by the birds. Okay, so there are various factors, okay, which led to invasion. Okay, so invasion means the migration of spores or the seed, okay, from one area to this barren area. So because of the invasion, the pioneer species started growing into the nude area. What are the pioneer species? The first species started growing in the barren area. So when you look at the terrestrial part of the what you find, hierarch succession, once you observe, okay, so the process of succession over land, if you observe, the succession begins, what are the pioneer species on the land? Basically, over the barren area, such kind of biotic community evolve which can survive even on the less nutrient. Okay, so often what you observe that in that places, the lichens, mosses, algae, or the hardy grasses started developing, they started colonizing in these areas. So what we found that the migrations of the biotic community took place through air or water or by animal or by man. Okay, they colonizes, especially the pioneer species. What are the pioneer species we often observe on the land? Okay, these are the lichen or the mosses. In the water, the phytoplankton or the algae, as well as some hardy grasses, those who can survive on the harsh climate. What are the characteristics of this invasion? What kind of features you observe? Still the condition is extreme or tolerant somehow. Okay, the physical environment started changing when they invaded. Okay, the rapid growth we observe of this pioneer species, the pioneer species started growing in this area. Okay, the lichen and mosses started secreting certain substances from their body. Okay, and the process of weathering begins. So what you find that you find cracks and The rocks started weathering, okay, because of the interaction of this biotic community there, that led to the change in the physical environment. So the physical environment में देखोगे क्या होगा invasion के बाद, कि begins breaking down the rock and creating organic matters. ऑर्गेनिक मैटर दैट इज ह्यूमस, ये कैसे बनेंगे, जैसे लाइकेन मॉसेज ये बायोटिक कम्युनिटी है, वो डेड और डिकम्पोज होंगे, तो उनके बॉडीज में जब डिकम्पोजिशन होगा दैट क्रिएट्स द ऑर्गेनिक मैटर और ह्यूमस. तो अभी तुम्हें क्या दिखाई देगा आफ्टर इन्वेजन कि सॉइल के अंदर थोड़े ऑर्गेनिक कंपोनेंट भी डेवलप होना स्टार्ट हुए हैं बिकॉज ऑफ द डिकम्पोजिशन साइकिल. Okay, in ecosystem I had already discussed with you people about decomposition cycle. Okay, तो इस तरह से जो यहाँ सॉइल, जो इनिशियल सॉइल बनेंगे उसमें थोड़े सा अमाउंट ऑफ ह्यूमस भी होगा, ऑर्गेनिक मैटर भी होगा. ओके, नाउ व्हाट आर द थर्ड प्रोसेस एज आई हैव सेड. अब क्या होंगे कि अब यहाँ पर मैंने कहा माइग्रेशन हो गया, स्पीसीज इवॉल्व हो गए. अब वो स्पीसीज अपने आप को कॉलोनाइज करते हैं, एग्रीगेट होते हैं और स्टेबलाइज करना स्टार्ट करते हैं उस चेंजिंग एनवायरनमेंट के अंदर. ठीक है, अब कंडीशंस थोड़े से जो होंगे वो ज्यादा मोर टॉलरेंट होंगे. सो इस्टेब्लिशमेंट और इकेसिस वर्ड यूज करते हैं. स्पीसीज ग्रोथ यहाँ देखोगे तो पायनियर स्पीसीज ग्रो, they started also dying, decomposition takes place, so organic matter started, okay, developing in the soil upper layer, decomposes adding the organic material to the substrate. Okay, सो सॉइल अगर देखोगे तो क्वालिटी इंप्रूव हो गई क्योंकि इसमें इनऑर्गेनिक कंटेंट के साथ ऑर्गेनिक मटेरियल भी है, तो इसकी डेप्थ भी बढ़ रही है, फर्टिलिटी भी इंक्रीज हो रहा है और द वाटर होल्डिंग कैपेसिटी आल्सो इंक्रीजेस बिकॉज द सॉइल बिकम मोर पोरस नाउ. ओके, सो द पोरोसिटी आल्सो इंक्रीजेस. सो नाउ द सॉइल इज मच बेटर देन द अर्लियर. कंडीशन बदल गया, इडेफिक फैक्टर्स अगर आप देखेंगे दैट क्वाइट चेंज नाउ. नाउ so that changing environment, the formation of the more deeper soil led to the replacement of the community. अब जो pioneer community थे lichen mosses, ऐसा नहीं है कि वो पूरी तरह wiped out हो जाएंगे, but that were replaced by the more dominant community, that is the grasses. herbaceous plant आ जाएंगे, shrubs आ जाएगा, and these herbaceous plant and shrubs started dominating that areas and replaced the pioneer community, that is the lichen and mosses. समझ में आ रहा है क्यों हो रहा है, क्योंकि इन्वायरमेंट चेंज हो रहा है. सेकेंड पार्ट भी यहाँ इंक्लूडेड है, मैं बताता चला जा रहा हूँ विथ एवरी स्टेजेस की हाउ द एनवायरमेंट चेंजेस. मैं ये भी बता रहा हूँ हाउ द स्पीसीज कॉम्पोजिशन चेंजेस. फाइनली वी हैव टू कंक्लूड आवर आइडियाज थ्रू टेबुलर फॉर्म्स. ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड. अब देखो नेक्स्ट स्टेज है कंपटीशन एंड रिएक्शन. अब अगर वहां स्पीसीज एग्रीगेट करेगा तो और कॉलोनाइज करेगा तो उसमें सिमिलर स्पीसीज भी होंगे और डिफरेंट स्पीसीज भी होंगे. सो व्हाट इट लेड टू, इट लेड टू इंटर स्पेसिफिक इंटरैक्शन एज वेल एज इंट्रा स्पेसिफिक इंटरैक्शन. सेम स्पीसीज के दो इंडिविजुअल सेम रिसोर्सेज के लिए फाइट करेंगे, दैट इज कॉल्ड इंट्रा स्पेसिफिक इंटरैक्शन. दो डिफरेंट स्पीसीज के इंडिविजुअल भी कॉम्पीट करेंगे रिसोर्सेज के लिए, शेल्टर के लिए. सो बेसिकली व्हाट काइंड ऑफ कंपटीशन इज, competition is for basically resources and space. Okay, वो shelter के लिए. So what I had mentioned, interaction among species led to what? Interaction, intraspecific as well as interspecific. In broader term you can use this term. Okay, as more species arrive they compete for the light, space, water, nutrient, etc. Okay, that also led to the environmental modification. अब इस इंटरैक्शन के कारण वहां पे फिजिकल एनवायरनमेंट भी चेंज होगा. ओके ओके, एग्जिस्टिंग स्पीसीज ऑल्टर द एनवायरनमेंट लाइक शेडिंग, चेंजिंग सॉइल पीएच, मेकिंग इट मोर सूटेबल फॉर न्यू स्पीसीज. अब ये हर्बेसियस प्लांट और श्रब्स, इनसे भी लीफ गिरेंगे, इनके रूट डिकम्पोज होंगे, ऑर्गेनिक मैटर और ह्यूमस कंटेंट इनरीच होगा, सॉइल की पीएच भी चेंज होगी. Now community started shifting this environmental changes and the competition as well as reaction to the physical environment. The community started reacting with the physical environment and that led to the change in the physical environment. that changing physical environment again become conducive for the new species. तो अब जब जो बीच के जो स्पीसीज थे इंटरमीडिएट स्पीसीज, जैसे मैंने कहा हर्बेसियस प्लांट और श्रब, अब वो रिप्लेस होंगे ओके। तो अब यहाँ स्मॉल ट्रीज भी आपको दिखाई देने लगेंगे। सो ऐसा नहीं है कि लाइकेन मॉसेस ऑल टुगेदर वाइप्ड आउट, दे आर देयर, बट व्हाट वी फाइंड डोमिनेंट कम्युनिटी चेंज होता चला जा रहा है। अब देखो फाइनली उसी प्लेस के ऊपर ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम एक डोमिनेंट कम्युनिटी जो होती है अपने आप को स्टेबलाइज करती है, उसको कहते हैं क्लाइमेक्स स्टेज। एंड दैट कम्युनिटी हु those who started stabilizing in that final stages, the climax stage, are called climax community. On the terrestrial part of the earth, on the land, what we find in the when you observe hierarch succession, trees are the dominant community. Why? Because they are able to okay compete with the other species very efficiently. They occupy more space, they took more nutrient, okay, so they survive for a longer period of time. For example, the natural forest biome, if you observe, are the climax community over the land. So a stable ecosystem, climax stage, okay, that is a stable stage, relatively stable and mature community forms. When you look at the dominant species, what you find, the species diversity, okay, and composition changes with the time. Why? Because the environmental condition change with the time, okay. So long-lived species like hardwood trees, for example, oak, maple, okay, dominate in the forest climax community. So you have to explain all these stages in the first part. Okay. Now after explaining your these stages, you can make the diagram. You can mention what kind of biodiversity change and environmental stability, why rich, okay, because soil is now rich in the nutrients and organic content, okay, soil are more thicker, the microbiota evolve over the soil, bacterias, okay, now, and the energy flow and nutrient cyclings are more okay efficient. तो अब देखो यहाँ पर वो स्टेजेस को दिखाया है, दिस इज द बेयर रॉक, द फर्स्ट स्टेज विच वी कॉल्ड द स्टेज ऑफ न्यूडेशन। यहाँ क्या देख रहे हो, देयर इज अ बेयर रॉक, on this bare rocks, okay, invasion took place. Who invaded? The lichen, mosses, sages, algae. But here I had mentioned about the hierarch succession, so here I had mentioned lichen, mosses, sages, okay. And what happened, the weathering process now begins, okay, few organisms started dying, so soil comparatively thin here, because of weathering, thin soil has developed, having certain organic contents also evolve over period of time, okay. Further, what you find here, the mosses and the herbaceous plants started evolving, grasses थोड़े थोड़े यहाँ evolve होने शुरू हो गए हैं. Disintegration and weathering of rocks is much more because of the interaction of this species with this physical environment. Okay, the organic matters started evolving over period of time. Soil थोड़ा और deep और thicker होगा, organic content थोड़े और ऊपर के layer में evolve होंगे, develop होंगे. Then grasses, as well as when you look at the grasses established in much more number, अब यहाँ पे species change हो गया, अब यहाँ herbaceous plant and grasses evolve and started stabilizing their self in this changing environment. Because of decomposition of root, stems and leaves of this herbaceous plant and grasses, the organic content enriched in this area, the soil become much more thicker in comparison to the previous stage. Okay, now, so these are the seer or seral community, intermediate community. What you find, the change in the species composition as well as biodiversity. यहाँ पर थी ही नहीं स्पीसीज कॉम्पोजिशंस, यहाँ जीरो था, यहाँ बेयर एरिया था, डाइवर्सिटी नहीं थी, यहाँ लाइकेन मॉसेस आए, ठीक है, डिफरेंट स्पीसीज स्टार्टेड कोलोनाइजिंग, पायनियर स्पीसीज कहते हो, ठीक है। फिर यहाँ पर क्या है, थोड़े ग्रासेस भी इवॉल्व हो गए, लाइकेन, मॉसेस, हेजेस, ओके। सो डाइवर्सिटी थोड़ी बड़ी, स्पीसीज कॉम्पोजिशन देख रहे हो, फिजिकल एनवायरनमेंट बता रहा हूँ कैसे चेंज हो रहा है, ठीक है। अब यहाँ देखो, यहाँ स्क्रबलैंड डेवलप हो गया, उडी वेजिटेशन हो गए, छोटी छोटी झाड़ियां आ गई, ठीक है। ऑर्गेनिक कंटेंट और रिच हो गया, थिक सॉइल्स है, soil become more porous, layered, okay. So the physical environment started changing, the soil condition started changing, the pH of the soil started changing, okay, because of the various process of decomposition, disintegration, okay. So that led to that, make the condition more conducive for the bushy vegetation, for the shrubs, okay. And at the final stage, okay, that is the climax stage, what the tree stabilizes their self for a longer period of time, the soil become much more thicker, the pH is, okay, sufficient to grow the huge tree in that areas, and the forest community evolve over period of time on the land. So these are the stages of what the hierarch succession. So this is the pioneer species, lichen, mosses, sages, and finally the climax community. The trees stabilizes here. So if you have to summarize your idea, the second part of the question is what? What kind of changes you observe in species composition, biodiversity, and physical environment? You can explain your idea. So this is pioneer, this is climax. In between, whatever the species you are observing here, these are called seer community or the seral stage, intermediate stage are. So here what I had mentioned in this table feature, you can divide your, okay, table into this feature: early stage, that is pioneer stage; mid stage or intermediate, which is also called seral stage; and the climax, that is the final stage. When you are observing species composition in the pioneer stage, the species composition is very less, the few species are there, hardly you find lichen, mosses or hardy grasses. In the intermediate stages, species composition is comparatively more richer, okay. So the grasses, herbs, shrubs, small trees you can observe in intermediate stage, what we call seral stage. At the final stage, finally the trees, animals, and the decomposers like fungi and bacteria started evolving in and stabilizing their self in the final stage. So what you observe? Change in species composition, what the examiner had asked in the second part of your question. Then biodiversity, at early stage there is a low biodiversity. Why? Because less species are there in that area. But over the period of time, when the physical environment changes, the biodiversity also changes, because species compositions now changing and growing over the period of time. So increase हो रहा है, और finally high biodiversity होगी, variety of the trees along with the shrubs, grasses, lichen and mosses are there also, but dominant community is the climax, that is the tree, okay. फिर उसके बाद उसके अलावा एनिमल्स भी होंगे इन द फॉरेस्ट. इफ यू टेक द एग्जांपल, द डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ वाइल्ड एनिमल्स आर देयर आल्सो, okay. Decomposer are also there, the variety of fungus, fungi and bacteria are also residing, and some species are also living in the soil also, like earthworm if you look, okay. Soil quality in the early stage or pioneer stage, the soil quality is very poor. The rock is hard. Hardly you observe a prolonged weathering process, or the if the soil is present, the soil is very thin. But in intermediate stage, the thickness of the soils now begins, as well as the organic matter, that is the humus content, started enriching. The pH of the soil now changes along with the time, okay. So what you find? The change in the condition. In the final stage, the soil are rich in the nutrients, the organic content, okay, also enriched in this soil. Soil are more thicker, more layered structure you observe. the soil having the more water absorbing capacity as well as holding capacity. Okay, so this is the changes you observe. Another changes you find in the microclimate, extreme temperature, okay, and the low moisture is there in the pioneer stage. सेरल स्टेज में आते हो इंटरमीडिएट में तो मॉडरेट क्लाइमेट दिखता है, मॉइस्चर इंक्रीज होने लगते हैं, और जब फाइनल स्टेज में आते हो जहाँ ट्री देखते हो इसका मतलब है वहाँ पर कंडीशंस जो है मोर कॉन्ड्यूसिव और स्टेबल कंडीशन है. एंड द why the tree is able to grow, because much more water is present in the atmosphere as well as the underground water availability is there, so condition is humid. Now, when you look at energy flow here, because less species are there, so flow of energy is very simple. Okay, now the complexity in the energy flow, क्योंकि यहाँ पे अब हर्ब सब ग्रासेस भी हैं, कम्युनिटी इवॉल्व हो रही हैं, तो उसके ऊपर डिपेंडेंट एनिमल्स भी हैं. सो नाउ द एक्सचेंज and the flow of energy begins in the directional, okay, unidirectional uh, uh, areas when you look at. So energy के बारे में जानते हो, energy flow unidirectional होता है, ठीक है ना, from producer to the herbivores, that is the primary consumer, then to the secondary, then tertiary. So these consumer, largely the animals, evolve in this over this biotic community. Okay, now एनर्जी फ्लो देखोगे क्लाइमेक्स स्टेज में तो मोर स्टेबल होगा, इक्विलिब्रिया को अचीव करेगा और एफिशिएंट होगा. कम्युनिटी स्ट्रक्चर अगर देखेंगे तो प्रायनियर में सिंपल कम्युनिटी थी क्योंकि स्पीसीज डाइवर्सिटी ही नहीं थी ज़्यादा, बिगिनर्स थे वहाँ, इनिशियल स्पीसीज थी, दोज हु आर स्ट्रगलिंग टू स्टेबलाइज देयर सेल्फ. उसके बाद थोड़ा सा जो कि यहाँ पर सॉइल के कंडीशन बदल गए, एनवायरनमेंट चेंज हुआ, तो कम्युनिटी अगर आप देखोगे तो थोड़े लेयर्ड कम्युनिटी दिखाई देंगे, कैनोपी होगा, क्योंकि मैंने कहा था स्क्रबी वेजिटेशन होंगे, स्रब्स, ओके, और हर्ब्स और ग्रासेस ये सब डेवलप हो चुके होंगे, तो थोड़ा सा आपको क्या होगा, इवॉल्विंग कम्युनिटी दिखाई देंगी, कम्युनिटी स्ट्रक्चर जो है वो क्वाइट विजिबल होगा. क्लाइमेक्स कम्युनिटी में तो स्ट्रेटिफाइड दिखाई देंगे, हाई कैनोपी एंड टॉल ट्रीज, फिर उसके बाद द middle height, the shrubs, okay, the herbs, the grasses, lichen, mosses, okay, and sometimes you find the underground tubers also. So basically what you find, stratified structure. तो इस तरह से तुमने एक्सप्लेन कर दिया क्या, तुमने एक्सप्लेन कर दिया सेकेंड पार्ट को भी, कि कैसे स्पीसीज कॉम्पोजिशन चेंज हो रहे हैं, कैसे फिजिकल एनवायरनमेंट बदल रहा है, कैसे बायोडाइवर्सिटी चेंज हो रही है एट डिफरेंट स्टेजेज ऑफ सक्सेशन. पायनियर में क्या हो रहा है, मिडिल स्टेज में क्या हो रहा है, और फाइनल स्टेज में क्या हो रहा है. नाउ कम टू द कंक्लूजन. अब आपके आइडियाज को सम अप करना है, सो लेट्स कंक्लूड योर आइडिया. अब इसमें जब कंक्लूजन लिखोगे तो अपने पूरे आइडियाज को सम अप करना होगा. हाउ आई हैड mentioned a conclusion that ecological succession, as I have said during introduction, is a dynamic and transformative process that result in the gradual build up of what, a stable and self-sustaining ecosystem. तो मैंने क्या कहा कि आपने देखा अभी क्या है, एक डायनेमिक प्रोसेस है इकोलॉजिकल सक्सेशन, और ट्रांसफॉर्मेटिव भी है, क्योंकि ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन हो रहा है किसमें, स्पीसीज कॉम्पोजिशन में, बायोडाइवर्सिटी में, फिजिकल एनवायरनमेंट में. Okay, that result in the gradual build-up of a stable and self-sustaining ecosystem, जहाँ एक स्पीसीज दूसरे के साथ एनर्जी और मटेरियल्स साइक्लिंग और फ्लो के साथ इंटरकनेक्टेड है, दैट मेक द सिस्टम मोर सस्टेनेबल. ये सेल्फ सस्टेनिंग इकोसिस्टम के तौर पे इवॉल्व करता है. एंड द जर्नी फ्रॉम अ बैरन एनवायरनमेंट टू अ क्लाइमेक्स कम्युनिटी involve significant changes in species composition, biodiversity and abiotic condition, that is the physical environment, okay, which highlighting the nature resilience and capacity for recovery and growth. So here in the conclusion, if you look at, I had addressed both the part of the question, and I had, okay, briefly describes or sum up all these idea what I had explained. Okay, so this is enough for today. आज के लिए इतना ही, आज ये क्वेश्चंस हमने डिस्कस किया. ओके, तो फिर नेक्स्ट जो क्वेश्चंस होगा वो हम लोग ब्रेक के बाद डिस्कस करेंगे. थैंक यू.